Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 274 of Humanity Rising. This is a particularly exciting week for us because this week we have partnered Humanity Rising with World Unity Week. World Unity Week has been a coalition that's been building for a number of years. And now is comprised of literally hundreds and hundreds of organizations all over the world that have been coming together around various milestones for the United Nations, but with the basic impulse to bring the human community into unity and to both celebrate that unity but also to explore very deeply why unity seems to be so elusive and what we can do together to build it, to scaffold it, so that as history unfolds, we can amalgamate all the diversity that comprises our humanity and the larger ecosystem into an integrated, unified whole. And today we're going to contemplate what is possibly at the heart of unity, a cornerstone of unity, and that is the art and practice of dialogue. How do we interact with diversity in such a way that out of the interactivity of the parts, a larger whole emerges that not only subsumes the parts, but transforms them into new possibilities. That's the art of dialogue. And that's what we're going to contemplate today. So let us begin as we always do with just a moment or two of coming into our bodies, placing our attention on our hearts. And for the next minute or two, just attune yourself with your heart in a spirit of gratitude and thanksgiving that you're alive. We're all alive at this most extraordinary moment in the human journey. Thank you, everyone. And now with an open heart and a heart full of gratitude and love for each and every one of you who are joining our session today. I want to commence our program by recalling that last week, President Biden and President Putin met in Geneva for a summit. They came into their meetings armored with positions, staffed up with reinforcing information and points of view. They had separate press conferences after their 5-hour meeting was over. They assured the world community that they did not give any ground to the other side, but rather they engaged in constructive discussion. That was not dialogue. That was posturing. That was perpetuating illusory positions of strength in a world desperate for dialogue, but not yet imaginative enough to actually engage in the humility of dialogue. So today we're going to commence World Unity Week with an exploration of dialogue by two people who probably know as much or more about dialogue than anybody out there. Susan Taylor, the CEO of Generon, which was founded by Joe Jaworski, Otto Scharmer, and others, and for decades now, through the U process, has brought people into dialogue in a powerful, profound, transformational way. And also Hidde van der Pol, who has been working with Generon and working with Susan, and has been involved, like Susan, in consulting corporations, global institutions, individuals of all kinds for many decades, and empowering them to take whatever issues they have, whatever stumbling blocks that are obstructing their way, and to transform them into leverage points of deeper capacity to bring goodness into the world and to ensure the success of their organization. So Susan and Hidde, I want to welcome you to Humanity Rising as we kick off World Unity Week and turn the program over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share here for just a few moments. So Hidde and I are really thrilled to be with all of you, especially on a topic that is really, really close to our hearts. And that is the topic of dialogue with a capital D, in the way that David Bohm referred to dialogue, often referred to as Bohmian dialogue. And so as we were thinking about today, this unique opportunity, especially being linked to World Unity Week, we were thinking about how our current reality is really a reality based in polarization, and how that polarity is actually increasing worldwide. And in that, creating a society that fuels either or thinking, inequality, individualism, judging, hate speak, fragmentation. And Jim asked in his opening remarks a really great question about, why is unity so elusive? Why is unity so elusive? And in that, why is it needed? Because if we're creating something now that is about who is right and who is wrong, what we really, really need in order to face the challenges humanity is facing is both and thinking. A mindset of equality, an intention of unity, openness, and acceptance. And how might all of those sorts of things bring harmony to us in a way where we really genuinely have an intention to fully understand one another, to fully understand other before projecting our understanding onto you. And as we think about that, Hidde and I truly believe that dialogue answers this call to our time, this call for unity. Because one of the things that dialogue has the power to do is to maximize our influence to co-create new realities. It's a gateway to the emergence of our future, where the sustainability of humanity and our planet can actually become our reality. And as Dr. David Bohm, quantum physicist, thought about dialogue, he really felt that the practice of dialogue could help us to see mutual understanding and harmony through seeing all others as legitimate. And it's part of the reason why David Bohm labeled dialogue with a capital D. He felt dialogue to be so powerful, it could actually have the potential in his mind to bring world peace. So in the last 10 years of his life, he focused on this thing, again, he called dialogue. And this is how David Bohm actually thought about it. He thought about dialogue as a free-flowing group conversation where participants attempt to reach shared meaning by experiencing everyone's point of view equally, without prejudice, and how that could potentially lead to deeper understandings. So linking to some of the things that, Jim, you were referring to in your opening remarks, this idea of taking parts, the worldviews, the mindsets, the opinions we all hold as individual human beings, how could we take all those parts and transform them into new possibility? How could we do that? If David Bohm were with us today, right now, I believe his answer would be the same as mine and Hidde's. And he would answer that dialogue has the potential to do that. And here's why. Real dialogue is where two or more people become willing to suspend their certainty in each other's presence. This is one of my personal favorite quotes from Dr. Bohm, this idea of just suspending my certainty. How vulnerable that feels, how frightening it can feel to us, especially in a world that just feels so divided. Most of us, whether we're conscious of it or not, I think have a tendency to want to hide instead of really putting ourselves out there. But just what if we could become willing to suspend our own certainty in each other's presence? What could that bring? And this is a key component, a key element, very significant element actually of dialogue. Because when we think about dialogue and we break it down into its definition, dialogue equates to meaning through relationship. And one of the things that Dr. Bohm talked about was he would link our own different views to banks along a stream or a river. And like the stream that flows between different banks, meaning flows among and through and between people in a group. And yet each of those banks represent different points of view. So the object of dialogue is not to win or lose. It's not to be right or wrong. It's not to analyze or win an argument or even exchange opinions. Instead, dialogue is a practice and an opportunity for us to listen and suspend in order to gain new perspective. And I want to focus for just a moment on this word suspend, because there's two definitions. Suspend can oftentimes mean to put aside or even to let go of. And that is not the way that Dr. Bohm thought about suspension, particularly with regard to the points of view and the opinions that we each hold as individuals based on our life experience. David Bohm thought about suspension like you would suspend a ceiling fan or a light from the ceiling. So in other words, put it out in front of you. Put those different points of views. Share those different opinions and perspectives with the other people in the group as a way to show it to them and to yourself. And then in the differences of those opinions, hold them. hold the differences. And when we do that, even when your opinion might be diametrically opposed to mine, when we can just hold that tension, it creates new understandings, it creates new realities. And so when I read all the works of David Bohm, I've read them many, many times. I've been studying his work for just about 30 years now. What really occurred to me as a significant, if not one of the most fundamental underpinnings of dialogue, was that when we defend, we divide. When we can hold, we create harmony. When we defend, someone has to be right and someone has to be wrong. When we hold it, even when it's diametrically opposed, that polarity becomes something we manage because each is interdependent upon the other. And so that is what I think is the key, especially when I link it to, Jim, what you were referring to, and this beautiful week that we have in front of us, which is all about unity. So at this point, Hidde, I'm going to go ahead and you talk for a little bit.
All right. Thanks, Susan. Yeah, so many of you, you want to keep on sharing, Susan, or you want me to just react on how far you went so far?
No, I was still sharing. I think there was a technology glitch. I'll just pull it back up again.
Here we are.
There we are. Thanks, Hidde.
Yep. So many of you are probably familiar with the iceberg model, and we always show this in relation to the work of David Bohm and what Susan has just eloquently explained, is that if you only look at the to the human eye on the surface visible part, then you don't see the whole. And talking about unity, the unity and the whole of the iceberg encompasses a lot more than just the thing sticking out above the water level. So when we dive into that and we start in the top, what is visible is what is more tangible. It's more the rationality and the tangibility of vision, strategy, metrics, and observable behaviors. But if we dive underneath the surface, the water surface, it starts to become a bit what we call the murky part. This is where structures and processes and governance play a role. It's not that much tangible, but it does have an effect on the visible part. And then going down to the lower levels of the iceberg, this is where the magic happens. So what is hidden are paradigms of thought, fixed mindsets and assumptions, and what we call culture. Mostly intangible, very intangible parts, yet very a lot of attributes have an impactful on the whole of this picture. And then last but certainly not least is the source, what we call the source, is where does it come from? What is driving the hidden parts, which is then fueling the murky part and the visible part? It's fears, it's trust, it's attachments and unconscious biases. So what this tells you is that if we want to change and if we want to create a space, a holding space where new realities can emerge, we need to embrace and actually make visible through expression, but also through awareness, these elements of source that you see in the bottom of this iceberg. So talking about unity, this whole is a unified element that all needs to be put on the table, all needs to become visible in order to have dialogue in a way that David meant it to be. Yeah, and then moving to the next element that we wanted to show you and to share with you is the 4 ways of talking and listening. So Susan already addressed the listening part, and there's different ways of listening. You can listen to react, but you can also listen to fully understand. But if we go from the lower left quadrant and turn anti-clockwise to the above left, we distinguish 4 types. One is forming. It's a stage where we learn about each other. We still feel some fears and excitement, and with that, we want to play it safe. Then we move to the field 2 is what we call more of a debate. So in there, we see that there's a controlled discussion. So we start to feel a little bit more safer and challenge each other. And with that comes the clashes of power. We're still focused on me, the I, and my point of view. Moving on to the top right, which we call norming. This is where we start to see you and me at the same time. So we start to engage more. We create spaces for reflection, for inquiry. So what we see is that curiosity starts to expose itself. And moving along with this trend, we then finally come into what we call the performing stage. And this is related to dialogue or generative dialogue, what we are talking about today. So this is not just the parts, you and me, but this is the we as a whole. So here we talk about and search for shared meanings and shared goals. We are actually working as one, but we're talking about we. So this is a unified experience. And we even go that far that we call it a single intelligence. No distinction between me and you, but it's we. These are the sections and the awareness. It's elements to be aware of. Whenever you go into a meeting or a conversation that you have, it is not just giving you definitions on what type of conversations you're having. This is more than that. This is a state of being. This is a mindset that we're talking about. Yeah, so today we want to explore with you the performing part, so the dialogue or the generative dialogue part.
Thanks, Hidde. And maybe I could build on that a little bit, because I just want to make sure that everyone who's listening understands that, you know, when we share a slide like this, it's not to say that either one of these fields or either one of these areas is right or wrong, or even good or bad. I think linking to what you were just sharing around mindfulness and a state of being, it's understanding a couple of things, right? It's understanding what field maybe I'm in, and from where am I interacting with another in one of those fields, combined with which one is most appropriate. So for example, we probably don't need to get into a generative dialogue if I'm teaching someone how to tie his or her shoe, right? Maybe that could just be a monologue. And when I was thinking about, Jim, what you said with regard to Biden and Putin and the constructive discussion they were having, it links exactly to what you were saying as you were taking us through these 4 fields. Again, around that state of being and the mindfulness, the intention, right? The intention that underpins any one of these fields as I'm interacting with another person, being focused on my inner dialogue at the same time that I'm focused on the dialogue I'm having with other, right? So I think for me, it's important for us to understand that, again, linking to polarity, all of these fields have a healthy component to them and maybe a component that's not very healthy, right? It's important sometimes to protect ourselves, for example, when we're going into a new situation, forming a new team in a business, or entering a new community for the first time, right? We want to kind of feel things out, and that's healthy. That's our natural instinct. It's how we're wired as human beings, right? Debate sometimes I think gets a negative connotation to it. And debate is not always a negative thing. Again, it's from where and why, that intention piece. Am I in this debate? Debate can be incredibly healthy. It's really important for us to be challenged, especially if we're trying to get to those more diverse points of view that we all have, and create opportunities for that creative tension, you know, the antithesis of that, to actually birth something new. Of course, conversation, we've all been in those moments when we've been incredibly reflective and very present and vulnerable. And again, that idea that I actually can change my view, because, you know what, I don't know everything, and maybe my view isn't one that's appropriate for this particular circumstance or this particular issue at hand. And then moving into the fourth field, that total we, that unity. And I love, Hidde, how you linked that to unity, this generativity that exists when we have equality between everyone, when we're not there to win, when we can come in with a beginner's mind and explore everyone's assumptions and points of views in ways that help me learn. So that's the big learner piece there for me as well. So I just wanted to build a little bit on that, Hidde, and thank you for that opportunity as we move into the principles, which I'm going to go ahead and share next, if you'd like to go ahead and speak to them.
Sure. Yeah, so even if it's what we just said, it's a state of being. There are some elements that we can really focus on and be aware of. And there's a list of them right here, and those are key elements to get into that quadrant of what we call dialogue, the performing part. So seek first to fully understand. Why is this important? Because this moves you out of trying to convince only the other of your point of view. It gets you in curiosity to maybe ask questions and to really start walking around and look at the different perspectives that might be out there. But in order to do that, you have to slow the cadence. You have to slow the pace in which you want results or want to finish a meeting or finish a conversation. You need that reflection time. You need that inner reflection, and you also need the time to explore in order to fully understand the others. And then it is not only noticing assumptions that you might have, but it's also noticing assumptions that others might have. And again, building on the point that Susan made, it is not right or wrong to have an assumption. What we want to be out there is that we notice that the assumptions are present and that they are there, because assumptions hold information. And so do the opinions and your point of views. And that's why we need to suspend. We need to get them in front of us, so that we are able to watch them, to observe them, and to fully understand them. And then last, but certainly not least, is question yourself, when do I speak? Becoming aware of when you speak, when it is your turn to speak. And it has to do with sensing. There might be inner elements going on that kind of trigger you or point you out, say, oh, apparently it's my turn to speak. Sometimes I have maybe my heart pounding in my throat, and I use that as an element of saying, well, maybe now it's starting to get some time for me to say something. But before I speak, I ask myself 3 questions. So have I really heard what has been said? And sometimes this is not just listening to the words that are spoken, but it's also to the words that are not spoken, to silence that might be there. And then, is it my turn to speak? And is what I'm going to say, and this refers to the feel and the sense of unity, is it in service of the group, of the whole, of the unity that is there? And this will help you to really become an aware participant and partaking into the dialogue.
Absolutely. And to build on that a little bit as well, as something that I just saw in the chat from Diane with regard to debate, and something that she was saying around people really needing to be present when they're in debate, that debate is actually something that is very positive. And we say, yes, absolutely. I mean, healthy debate is an amazing opportunity to be able to understand and kind of spar a little bit, if you will, around different points of view. And the point you make, Diane, about being present is exactly what we're talking about with regard to dialogue, and dialogue linked to a state of being. Oftentimes, we debate from a very emotionally fueled state. So maybe we're angry about something. Maybe we have been hurt by something that someone in the group has said, or there's an issue going on that is just really bringing up a lot of emotion that is more fueled in a negative way. Oftentimes, again, if I'm emotionally fueled and I'm debating, I want to win. There's an intention that I have, which is about winning. And in that, I'm also then setting the stage for someone else to be the one who loses. So that's really what we were trying to talk about in that 4 quadrants slide. And then linking again to this idea of mindfulness, the assumptions. You know, what assumptions am I making if I'm feeling angry in this field of conversation that equates to debate, versus hitting that pause button, as I hear in your chats and suggestion, Diane, and being more present to fully understand, you know, what's going on in me as I'm bringing myself into the conversation. So I really appreciated that, and I saw that chat hit us, so wanted to go ahead and build. So as we move forward, what we'd really like to do is to actually give us an opportunity to all be in dialogue together, given some of the concepts that you've just learned. And Richard is going to help us out here. He's going to elicit an invitation to invite about 12 of you to come onto the screen with us and actually have a dialogue about what does it truly take to create unity. Given that this is the kickoff to Unity Week and we've been linking dialogue to an answer to the call for unity, what does it truly take to create unity? One world or a new story for humanity and a more sustainable, peaceful, just, and united Earth becomes our reality. And we can practice what we're learning here and what you all know and bring to the conversation about your understanding of dialogue as well, and take about 40 minutes, 30 or 40 minutes to have this conversation using the practice of dialogue. I'm going to go ahead and put the dialogue prompt in the chat, Richard, while you try to bring some people together here for us so we can have this awesome conversation.
Yeah, if people would raise their hands, I could see them on the list, and we'll also look in the chat. everyone that raised their hand is promoted. Do we have additional people, Susan, in the chat?
I haven't seen anyone raise their hand in the chat, Richard.
Oh no, they're raising it separately on my attendee list. Okay, we've got a couple more now.
Oh, we have a call for more men.
I've got one coming up here, Leo.
Okay,
He'll qualify.
good to go.
Yeah, the Zoom is being particularly kind of slow today. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, how many do you have, Susan?
I think it's looking good.
Okay, I've got everybody promoted that raised their hand.
We have 11, it looks like, so that's great. Oh, now 12. Awesome. All right, Hidde, over to you.
Over to me. Yeah, so let's engage. The invitation is to engage in a dialogue. Given the question that Susan posed, or put in the middle, if you like, and I'm just want to open the floor to every one of us, while we also take into consideration the chat that might be going on. But the dialogue is kind of like focused on the people who now are in Zoom image and on the panel. One of the things, maybe I start with some of my reflections based on the question that is out there for us, given World Unity Week. And one of the things that popped up for me was really about the term of yoga. So rather than immediately zooming out, I also wanted to put in the perspective of being in unity with yourself as an individual, which means being able to connect with your soul and be one with your soul. That's also a piece of unity that might even be very, very much required before we even step into unifying with others and connecting with others. And with that perspective, I just want to open it up for everybody. And I really want to invite everybody to just feel when it's your turn to speak, or when there is an urge to just pop in, and we'll see how it goes. So we don't, I would imagine we don't have to raise our hands or anything like we said. We can do it visually maybe in this panel, but I guess it will work well if we just open up and go off mute. And if there's too much noise, then we'll go on mute to have the speaker speak. Diane.
First of all, I have to say my stomach is churning and I feel really nervous because this is people I've never spoken to before. But in response to your words, speak from the soul, or be at peace with your soul, what I was thinking was, if you reach a certain point when you're with your soul as a way of life, you can't do anything else. You can, well, for me anyway, I can only come from my soul. I mean, I can hear it. I'm going high pitched and stuff, nervous, yeah. But yeah, I speak from my soul, and maybe all of us. The more we become, I guess, the more we get used to it, the more we come to terms with it and do it as a practice, and it happens all the time in the end. It's just good to be authentic. Authentic, that's a key word. I'll stop there. Be real.
Before I came on this conversation, I was talking to a woman who I just met for the first time this morning. And we both live in West Virginia. And I've gotten myself involved over the last month or 6 weeks with some political stuff that's going on here. And I had no clue that this would be the direction that my life would take at this moment. But speaking of unity, what I was just talking to this woman about is all the places where there hasn't been unity, and moving forward, the requirement of being in communication, and specifically in being in dialogue. And like, I've just been nominated and elected the co-chair of this affirmative action committee. And it's, people keep telling me, oh, you should do this. Oh, you should do this. I go, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to listen to people and invite people to participate. And those people can then bring the information. All we're here to do is to gather the information, put it together, and create it in an umbrella so that everybody can participate. So it's really interesting that this is the conversation today.
I'd like to.
Hey, Shannon, before you speak, I think Marilyn had a good suggestion for if you're not speaking, please mute your microphone so we don't have feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. The invitation to get in touch with your soul, and how do we weave ourselves into a unified one, the one that we keep saying that we are. How do we do that? I would like to invite you to consider the imagination. The imagination is something that we each personally have, one of our very own, and it is unique to ourselves. It is the most powerful gift that we have been given. And it comes with the body that is the gift. The gift is the body and the breath, and the power is the imagination. Everything that humanity has created has come through our imaginations. And so the invitation there is, how do we weave our imaginations together? And I believe that it is through the choice of what we want, each one of us, and how we give the power of ourselves into what we create through dialogue. We weave the one that we are through our imaginations. Thank you for listening.
I love that, Shannon. I just want to build on that a little bit. And then Catherine would love to hear from you. When you talked about the gift of imagination as a powerful gift, and how that comes also with the gift of our body, it reminded me of something that I learned from the works of David Bohm, when he talked about something called soma significance, and how we know the from where part. We know the intentional piece because we feel it in our body. And then linked to what Diane and Mary, you were saying, you know, how do we honor through authenticity and in listening to our bodies what needs to emerge into the conversation as a way to transform. So thank you for those wonderful comments. And Catherine, I think you had your hand up as well.
So when I think of dialogue and where we are in the world today, my mind always goes to trying to talk to those people who have created an alternative reality and become very vested in another kind of world. And I wonder, it's nice to say to speak from your soul, but that requires a certain kind of safety and confidence in the situation and in self. And my supposition is that when you are speaking to someone who is so passionate and so fixed in a reality that's been created, that's a really risky place for them to be. So many of those conversations have been volatile, accusatory, very tied to an identity of self as a good person, as a patriot, and the ability to think about oneself in a larger context or to even connect to someone else tends to undermine or shake that very separate and perfect identity that they've created. So I'm wondering how in dialogue, in the process of being together, you start to open and peel back that shell to give people the confidence and the safety to maybe be open to shades of gray when they've created such a black and white universe.
May I share?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. This is really a fascinating process, and there's so many points. One is when we were talking about soma, the power of the body to tell us, to guide us to what's driving us, or what's caught our attention. And for me, my personal work now at this most fascinating time of my life, just because I'm so engaged in this is the main conversation, I think, the main conversation, duality, unity. And so I have spent years becoming willing to not need to know, not need to be right. And it doesn't mean I'm always successful, but that work to not need to have the answer, to not need to be right, to be willing to listen when it's uncomfortable, be willing to be judged or thought ridiculous or a clown or whatever anybody else will think, and not care, just to be courageous, to just dare to be myself. It's like such an evolutional journey. It's so fantastic. And so I have a few little guides for myself. And one I have on my fridge, and it says, you don't have to like the situation, but you have to like yourself in it. And that really helps keep me purer, more tuned into what matters most to me. I work in the realm of spirit and education and mindfulness, and with children and adults and globally. And so my practice is at the first sign of disturbance in the field, in my field, in the first sign of any wrinkle in the force, in my field, stop and just take a breath and just catch myself again. It's like that is the magic moment to catch. And if I can do that, then I choose to put peace first. That's my work, putting peace first. And peace is not about me telling you how to be so that we can be peaceful. Peace is being able to listen to where do we disagree, but what do we have in common, and those kinds of things. It's such a rich dialogue. We could spend a month, and I wish we could just go to an island. There's one in Sweden that Thomas Bookman has there, is that institute. And, I'm connected to that Emerge program, and we ought to just go and just delve into these things so deeply. I'm so grateful for today's discussion. And this whole World Unity Week, I'm grateful also to be part of it. I'll be presenting on Wednesday more about this piece, but the dialogue, we have to be so vulnerable to be able to be in the dialogue, and so courageous at the same time. Such a wonderful both and. So I'm thanking you for bringing this to us today. Thank you so much.
Leo?
I got interrupted there, but I'm going to go back to Hidde's opening about yoga and yoke. I think the words are related. And my image of a yoke is the oxen, the two oxen put together in a yoke. And if we're going to plow the hard work of the field for world unity, but Hidde, you suggested that we first get in presence to ourselves. And so we're not yoked to another person, but to our very complex person who we are, and that we bring to dialogue a presence, like we do heart cohesion at the beginning of Humanity Rising, to get present to ourselves so that we will be able to be present to others. So I think that preliminary practice is crucial to bring intentionality to the dialogue, and not to jump in too quickly. Last night I was on a conference, a 3.5-hour long philosophy forum, and we encountered our good friend Jacob. Some of the group in the gallery know who Jacob is, and he teaches me the principles of dialogue in the negative way. The idea that he was not able to get present to himself before jumping in. And so we can learn from our mistakes too. We can learn from our failures at good communication. And I signed up for another talk yesterday about how to ask, listen, and answer uncomfortable questions. Well, there was a glitch in the information, and I ended up with the facilitator, but nobody else. So we had a one-on-one dialogue, and the one-on-ones are so easy to get into a deeper conversation. It's more complex with 3 people, with 4 people, with 12 people, and that's where we need to be alert to the dynamics of a larger group, and have protocol and ideas to keep the conversation on an even keel. The philosophy group had a 90-second rule, and I think my 90 seconds are about up. So I'll pass the talking stick to someone else.
Thank you, Leo. And I've seen you, Gard, so I think we're going to you next. I just want to build on this, because what turns out to be, when we talk about numbers or participants, what turns out to be ideal to have the principles of dialogue and experiencing dialogue is actually 18 to 24. The reason why that is because we are no longer capable of being polite to each other and say, well, if I say this, then I might offend that person, or I might offend that person. And we really are sharing our points of view and opinions. And that's what we need in order to have a new reality emerging. Because if we are too polite and trying to get everybody pleased, we're not getting to the essence, and the essence is not emerging out of it. So it's interesting to see that dynamic, and that's why sometimes it brings chaos. And that's exactly what is a vital element. From out of chaos, new realities emerge. Gard, over to you.
So thank you all. And my background, I went to Pacifica and studied imagination a lot, Shannon. And there's a distinction in alchemy between imagination and fantasy. And for me, David Bohm's great gift was the idea of the implicate field, in which there's an existential quality of unity already in place. And so how do we access that? In my personal experience is that it's three-dimensional. The vertical dimension requires some kind of contemplative practice, so I can shift the center of gravity away from my ego and my attachments and my negative biases. And that vertical dimension is absolutely critical in moving from fantasy to real imagination. And then the horizontal dimension for me requires, and the best word I can think of is Ubuntu. Rilke talked about expanding circles. And I give myself to the last one. I doubt I shall ever do it. But expanding circles of relational connection, moving from the self to family, to community, to the nation, to the world, to the universe. And that horizontal connection allows us to see ourselves in an implicate field of unity that already is there. And the contemplative experience gives us the opportunity to really feel it in the body and in the soul. And then out of those two dimensions, the vertical and the horizontal, comes the longitudinal, which is the gift that each of us has been given, which is unique to us, which only we can express. And in order for there to be unity, we have to in some way show up with that gift. Thank you.
Marie, did you have your hand up?
Yes. Oh, it's really beautiful to hear what everyone is bringing to this. I had one simple thing to bring, which is the power of silence and stillness. In that sitting with discomfort and awkwardness, and the power of creativity to mediate that. So there's something about creating together, something simple, something maybe repetitive with our hands or making food, that perhaps because it links with what you were talking about earlier, the somatic experience, when your body's engaged, we're not just in our minds and just feeling those emotions so deeply. If we can actually, physically weave something or crochet or do some simple making food together, there's space for the silence, because you can tolerate the silence more easily when there's a purpose, and it also brings people together with a sense of common purpose, a smaller, manageable one that everyone can connect to, like, we're going to eat this. We're going to, this can carry, this is a basket that can carry some apples we're going to gather later, or something like that. Because I noticed with my teenager, if you sit there in front of somebody and it's all intense, we're on this, we're talking about this now. can be overwhelming. I'm learning a lot from my teenager about ego, about my own ego, and letting that go and being quiet and not pushing. But yeah, as an artist, I've noticed how things calm down when we just already have that common purpose of something to do, but a small one.
Sandra?
Hi, good to see you all. I'm actually speaking in Korea. I hope you can hear me okay?
Sandra, could you speak up a little, please?
Speak up a little more.
Yes, thank you.
Is it better?
Little bit, but go ahead.
How's this? How's this now?
That's better. Go ahead, Sandra.
I was hoping that this conversation will move up from the individual level to group level, eventually to the global level. Because I am situated in Korea right now, I think my role that may be helpful to everybody or some of you, maybe the conversation between nations. As you know, conversations between North Korea and America has not been successful. I think on an individual level, is the ego, however you pronounce it, has been the stumbling block so far. I think Korean people, knowing Korean culture probably better than most of you here, I should say that Korea is a united country for many thousand years, have been very humble in terms of relationship with other countries. They have been so humble to the extent that they spend most of the time listening to what other countries or other people had to say. And only very recently, Korean people are waking up. We cannot go on like this anymore. We need to listen to what North Korea has to say instead of operating under the assumption they are like a monster with communism as ideology. But Korean people right now paying more attention to understand the history behind all this and the international relationships that has not been just. And not many people even know that Korea had been divided by the so-called superpower. So unity in diversity as a concept is a very beautiful concept. And I even delivered a speech at an international conference many years ago about this very subject, unity and diversity. And we can talk about it as a concept, but to practice is a whole another matter. And I think we need to pay more attention what kind of erroneous assumptions has been the stumbling block between these two countries. And North Korea recently has gained even the small power or authority to be able to sit down with American government, whereas it had been demonized for so long, and even by South Korean people, they have not been understood in terms of the disconnection between two regions, whereas Korean people as a body of soul for people have been one for so many thousand years, and that has been forgotten. Even many people in South Korea are not very aware of it, and not many people are aware of injustice that had gone between this small country, North Korea, and big power. So hopefully, we can all start imagining the united world that will be signaled by the reunification of two Koreas.
Yes. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you very much. And I'd love to take this opportunity to connect a few dots here. Because what you say about listening and the vulnerability really that comes with it. So listening as a way to become more unified, and the discomfort that comes with that, linking to what Marie was saying about silence. And something I put in the chat about silent and listen, those two words containing the same letters. I don't think that's a coincidence. And as I think about vulnerability, I'm reminded of a video actually I saw several years ago with Brene Brown. She was being interviewed, and Brene Brown is, you know, she's just the expert on vulnerability as far as I'm concerned. And she was sharing a story because she was getting ready to do a very big presentation. And as part of that, they had someone standing by her who was doing sign language. And so before she went on the stage, the person who was doing the sign language asked Brene Brown, is there any word that you might use a lot that we should know about? And Brene said, oh yes, I use the word vulnerability a lot. And so the person who was doing the sign language held out his hand and went like this to show her what the sign language was for vulnerability. And she said, what does that mean? And the other person said, weak in the knees. And Brene said, oh, no. This vulnerability is nothing about weakness. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It takes a lot of courage. Vulnerability is about strength. And so the gentleman who was doing the sign language said, oh, okay then, well, there's only one other sign for vulnerability. And Brene asked, well, what is that? And he went. And I thought that was beautiful because it meant an opening of the heart, an opening of the heart. And when I linked that to all the conversation that I've heard around the soul, and Gard, the point you made about, you know, one of the biggest gifts that David Bohm brought with regard to dialogue is this idea of, you know, what is essential, what is existential, right? And I love how you tapped into that, because one of the things that I remember reading about was that David Bohm did believe that the power of dialogue was so strong to, in his words, powerful enough to solve world peace. And here's why: because it addresses existential questions. Who am I? Where did I come from? Why am I here? What can I do? What should I do? And so I think that's why the shared meaning piece, as David Bohm described it, that glue that holds us all together, it comes from kind of the tacit and maybe implicit answers to those questions as we're paying attention to ourselves at the same time as we're having dialogue with the rest of the group. And then lastly, I just wanted to try to link this up because I saw a question in the chat, and we're going to get to some other questions in a moment, but I did see a question in the chat that I found quite interesting. It was from Jan, and she was asking this question about, you know, what happens when trauma enters the person's field, right? And is so uncomfortable, or feeling that it's difficult or even impossible to listen. What do you do? Like, what happens? And so I wanted to bring that into the field because it was a question on the chat, and part of it I think links to the piece about mindfulness that Hidde and I talk about when we link dialogue to a state of being. If I notice, for example, that someone is seeing red, I know that person isn't going to hear anything I say. seeing red requires a physical response, right? So think about someone who's having an emotional traumatic experience and or seeing red through anger. Let's say they're in a therapist's office. One of the tools that therapists often have is, you know, a way to hit a pillow or a way to physically release some of that trauma, that emotional trauma that's in us. So again, it's about paying attention to the intention, and in that being mindful of what's happening within me, but also what's happening within the group. So I wanted to try to connect some dots, and Hidde, maybe you want to find a way to do that as well, and maybe get one or two more. We've got about 20 minutes, I think, until the session's over, and I know we want to get to some Q&A and then the final call to action. So thank you for listening.
Nadi, I think it's you've connected already a lot of dots, and I think it's beautiful to see how the emergence of what everybody shared is kind of forming a unity around all the elements that are important. And you see the different experiences, the different point of views, the talents, the knowledge, and the wisdom that through our own daily work and experiences is being shared here, which expands the meaning and the understanding of dialogue and how we can actually live it in order to do maybe the smaller pieces of cooking a meal together, which is tangible, but also the bigger pieces of reuniting North and South Korea. So I think it's really it's playing with all of that, and the same elements can, like David Bohm said, bring world peace all together. So I think it's beautiful to see how this emergence of experiences and sharing is actually creating already the fuel for an emergence of a new reality. Are there any clear questions in the chat, Susan, that you've seen passing by? Because there's a little bit of a delay in my chat, so I'm not really up to speed, I guess.
Mark is wanting to talk.
Please.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Kurt. Thanks.
Hello. So I'm just loving the dialogue that we're having. The issue that comes up for me is the issue of learning. I'm quite worried in the world about the issue of extremism, and extremism by definition is the opposite of dialogue, from my point of view anyways. That dialogue by definition means that I'm open to a new point of view. I'm open to learning. And I appreciate very much that issue of, you know, we have to be present to ourselves in order to be present to others. And as a former therapist, I'm very aware of that idea that trauma tends to shut down our ability to be able to be present because of our trauma. But in the real world, what I see daily is so much extremism. And in that extremism, in that black and white thinking, or that lack of gray, or that lack of finding the rainbow, is what feels often like an impossibility of even a small amount of dialogue. I think this is the great challenge, whether we're talking about something as rich and beautiful as Korea, or something in the US or anywhere in the world. I think that's a great challenge for those of us interested in these kinds of questions like unity or dialogue, because there is no dialogue when we are not open to learning. So I raise this question in myself and look forward to your help.
Thanks, Mark. If the one thing that I want to build on this, just from a maybe a systemic point of view, is, and it has to do also with unity. So yes, extremism is worrisome, and at the same time, it is there. So by excluding it, we will never reach the whole, and therefore never be able to build unity. So we need to embrace it, not in a way of stimulating it, but the extremists and the views of the extremists should be invited into the whole in order to search and have the emergence of a new reality as well.
Shannon, did you want to add something?
Thank you so much. Such amazing things are being brought to this. Maria Louise, I have to highlight you at this point. And I love the idea of cooking together, but we have such different desires of what we put in our mouths. And yes, sharing what we put in our mouths is a very good way of learning about each other. But I think that we can go even deeper into a shared desire or need that we all have, and that is growing gardens. The work we do together supports the creation of the unity we seek. We weave it together by engaging in activities that create the garden that we got thrown out of. Well, in one way or another, mythology. But we're not there anymore, and it's really clear. But we can create a new one together. And if we engage in that work together, we allow the extremists who are absolutely sure that we're going to hell in a handbasket. And you know what? They might be right. And if we all stick in our corners and be extremists, we're going to let it go. We're going to not win. And when we win together, we all win. And it is only through weaving our imaginations and our actions together. And that is one that we can all get on board with, is how do we make our mother able to support us again and be the beautiful being that brought us into being. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for that, Shannon. And I have a question to the group, both panelists and all the attendees. As I was listening to the last few sharings linked to collective trauma and this idea of this polarized world that seems to be so amplified, I started thinking about pollution and how we talk about oftentimes pollution as something that comes from, you know, let's just say a refinery or a manufacturing plant or whatever we're doing that pollutes the air, right? And as I was thinking about that, the question I was asking myself and I'm putting to the group is linked to this idea of what we could put in our mouths. What if we reframed it to what's coming out of our mouths? Because pollution, I think, can also be linked to what we're saying to each other and the deeper component that I think dialogue demonstrates for us, which is that intention piece and that mindfulness piece. So my question would be something that we could all start doing right now that would be really simple. What if we were just more intentional? What if we were paying more attention to our intention in a way that it would show what was coming out of our mouths? And could we then create the meal from that perspective? Kurt?
Yes, I just posted in the chat something that brings about the idea of intention and focus. the key to life is to focus on that unity that we're talking about. And being a person in the Peace Lab, we focus on peace, and peace in everything, and everything with peace. With that focus is a key to possibly a conversation with people who may be opposers or others. And we know, because of physics and so on, and David, that there are no others. So when we stop thinking that there's resistance, the resistance starts to dissipate more when we focus on that peace within, and we are clear within. What does it bring for us? What has it always brought for us? So the verbiage that we use in our life, like you mentioned, Susan, how we offer a conversation. Instead of if, it's when. It's not if, because when we do things like we strain to go to the moon, everybody focused on it, and we got there. Just those imaginal cells can give us the same thing with peace. Peace between North Korea and South Korea. What a beautiful country to be able to unify. But where are the boundaries? We still have boundaries when we think of these two countries, when we think of the people and the citizen diplomacy that conversations have. What happens? I believe that we're on the right path when we keep focused on that. And if anybody wants to chat afterwards, I think it's going to be a great chat in the after chat. I look forward to seeing you, and I love you guys. Thank you for your offering today, everybody.
Thank you very much. And I can feel that this dialogue, this conversation could go on perhaps for the rest of the day. And I'm also noticing the time. So I believe Catherine and Diane both wanted to contribute, and we have literally about 4 minutes before we are going to start to come to a close. So if we could try to be concise, that would be incredibly appreciated. Catherine, I believe you had your hand first.
Thank you very much. So what Marie triggered in me is something that came up from a talk that Peter Senge did not too long ago. And he was talking about Chinese education. And one of the things that they do is create a social field. And that's one of the things that dialogue attempts to do, and you do it if you get to the fourth thing. But I'm wondering, I'm just speculating about starting out with a practice that would create a field. Humming. We talk about our body and our mind together creates that sense of unity already. Chanting does that. We're not so likely to chant. I don't know. We could sing a song. Do something, though, that creates a sense of unity, creates that social field from which we would then dialogue. So, thought.
Yes,
Thank you.
That leads perfectly into what I was going to say, which is a long time ago, my husband did Ramadan. He's an English person. He's English, like I am. And he kept coming around every day being really moody and bad-tempered. And I was thinking, John, we've gone without food for days on end before. We used to eat twice a week when we first lived together. What's the matter with you? And I thought, just quietly, I'll do Ramadan with you because maybe I shouldn't be criticizing. Let me see what happens. So I quietly just didn't drink any tea or didn't eat anything all until it was nighttime. And I loved it. I didn't get bad-tempered. So a year later, I did it a second time. And not only I wasn't taking anything into my mouth, but I noted as a natural process, I wasn't giving anything out of which I'm a very talkative person. And I really easily talk a lot. And I wasn't wanting to talk anymore. It was like magic had happened. And I realized that actually the unification of all those Muslim people who are all doing that same thing at the same time and probably reaching the same level of communication and togetherness on some level, that when Kurt, for example, because we speak sometimes and we're in the same group, and he talks about meditating together, all of us doing the same thing. Humming together would cover it. Singing together would be nice. Praying together is fine. Meditating together, wonderful. If all the world, in China, I mean, I don't know if it happens in Korea, Sandra, but in China, certainly, they all do Tai Chi the same time in the morning. I mean, any of these habits, surely if we all worldwide try to create a habit, something simple that we do at the same time every day where we all tune in, and then maybe we've grown our food on nice non-chemicalized soil, so our soil is alive again, and then we can join in and then share international dinners.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Diane. And David, you're going to be the last one to contribute in this part of the session, so thank you.
So I think throughout the discussion today, I was thinking about the premise of something that I'm writing right now, which is the importance of circle, the ancient practice of circle. And so if we really are to solve the problems that we are facing, and we can take it from our own selves up to solving the problem of bringing the Koreas back together, or any other kind of unity, I think it starts in circle and learning those practices of circle. So I found that I missed at the beginning of this session that we didn't have a moment to breathe and to center ourselves, to go into the idea that we need to center ourselves. And in order to achieve unity, we have to be at peace with ourselves. So that unity then leads to greater discussion, and then imagining what peace, what world unity would look like. I believe it arises from self to circle to community to nations to the globe. And it has to have a coherent structure. And the coherent structure I take from Gandhi: for the good of all. Right? Excuse me, for the good of all. If that were our mantra, if that were our guiding principle, we would perfect that over time through circle, through the shared wisdom of millions of circles. And that would be my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David. From I to circle to we to world. I love that. And I also love the different calls of action, if you will, that are coming out of this conversation as we come to a close here in just a few moments. So Hidde, maybe I could share the screen and you could speak to one potential call to action that you and I would like to share with the group.
Yeah, so Susan and I thought about a call to action for a long time now, as we feel that dialogue is underpinning everything that we're being challenged about individually and collectively right now. And we've come up with a virtual course as a prerequisite to a master course in Bohemian dialogue next year. It's set up in a way that it's very practical in terms of not so much time consuming, yet having the biggest impact that we could provide in order to get the principles of dialogue and the experience and the way of being of dialogue, as David Bohm envisioned it, across to as many people as possible. So these are the points, as you can read, 1 to 5 that we've brought together. I'm not going to read it out loud. I guess this will also be shared or possibly be shared. The timing is September 2nd to November 18th of this year. And if you go to dialoguecreates.com, there's also a page that gives you all the details of this course, an introduction in dialogue, as David Bohm has envisioned it. We have we have space for 30 participants, and as we said, this is a prerequisite that we came up with to a 12-month in-depth Masters in Bohmian Dialogue for those who are interested. And the reason why we're focusing on this again is because we believe that dialogue, the way David Bohm envisioned it, is the cornerstone and underpinning of everything that leads to unity and the emergence of new realities that that we need to seek and we need to stimulate and co-create all together. I think, Susan, that's what I would mention about it. Maybe you want to go a little bit more into detail from your side, if you feel that's necessary as well.
No, I think the detail you provided is great. The only thing I would mention is that this is not a typical online type of situation that most of you might be used to. It's very interactive. Everything is live, nothing's pre-recorded. So it would be very similar to what we did today, and it would involve a tutorial component, a lot of silence, different contemplative tools, as well as then coming into conversation about things that are happening in our own world and the world that we all live in. So it's a very interactive opportunity to apply these techniques and these concepts from Dr. David Bohm into our day-to-day real life to address some of the very things that actually came up in this conversation, and for which I'm very grateful that you accepted the invitation to participate with Hidde and me, as well as those who are not on the screen participating via chat. So at this point, Jim, I'd like to turn it over to you and we can close the session.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Hidde. And thank you, everybody who joined from our chat group. It's always a pleasure to welcome you to help shape Humanity Rising as we move forward. I think, the thing that struck me was the story you told, Susan, about the meaning of dialogue in the language of the deaf, and it's not weak legs, it's the opening of the heart. I think that captured metaphorically the essence of what this whole session is about. And just to connect it with one of the other points that was made about the vertical and horizontal dimensions of life, the vertical connecting us with transcendence in the etheric realms, the horizontal connecting us with the rest of reality as we know it. That also takes place in the heart. So I think the open heart is a beautiful metaphor for the unity that we seek, and a wonderful opening for Unity Week. World Unity Week, particularly here on Humanity Rising, as we participate in this most audacious global endeavor to remind the world of the importance of unity. So thank you all. You are all welcome to the after session chat. You'll see the link in the chat box. And then tomorrow, everyone, we're gonna shift to another domain, and we're going to have a dialogue with Robert Kennedy Jr., the son of Senator Robert Kennedy, and of course the nephew of President John Kennedy, both of whom were cut down by those who did not believe in unity in 1963 and then in 1968. So we'll be talking with Robert Kennedy about his passion around the environment, his comments on the pandemic as we convene here on Humanity Rising, same time, same station tomorrow. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in the after chat. We'll see you here again tomorrow for our session. Bye for now. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Hidde.